From Lucy, Rock and Roll High School. Okay, here we go. Lucy says, Father Simon, Brother Matthew, Sister Susie from the pub. I'm writing to confess a heinous event took place whilst I was in my third year of my Bachelor of Education degree at university. It's January 1996. I was about to embark on my third teaching practice, spending a term in the classroom, putting all of the skills that I'd learnt over the last couple of years into practice. The day came when we were told which school that we'd be in and the time that the minibus from the university would leave in order to take us to our placement. To my horror, I saw that I'd been placed in a school that was a considerable distance away and that my minibus would be leaving at 6:15 in the morning to undertake the 90-minute drive to school. I would be the first and last stop, so I would be in school about 7:45 every day, leaving at 4:15, getting home by 6. I lived with 4 other students, also student teachers, and we were all in different schools, every one of the others considerably closer than mine. One of my housemates, Jenny, was in a school that was 10-minute walk away from the house. Needless to say, we compared notes and speculated about our placements. My first day dawned. I arrived at school still in the dark and the snow, reported to the head teacher's office. He welcomed me and assigned my class. I had year 3, 7 and 8-year-olds. I was also told that my teacher was on maternity leave and that I would be supervised by a supply teacher who had started last week. Not a great start. However, instead of taking me to my classroom, the head grabbed his keys and told me to follow him to the minibus. He drove me around the estate, pointing out the houses in which each of the children in my class lived, whilst regaling us with various misdemeanours that members of their families had been jailed for.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
It turned out that we were going to be teaching the next generation of the Welsh branch of the Cray family.
Oh, lovely.
I spent the rest of the day trying to match faces to names on the register, whilst chaos continued around me as the pupils were, quite frankly, awful, and the supply teacher no clue how to control them. Of course, once I was at home, we all sat down to compare our schools and what we had learnt. As I was telling everyone about how it appeared I'd be teaching the future beneficiaries of Her Majesty's pleasure, Jenny interrupted and started talking about how she really didn't like the food at lunchtime.
Oh, dear.
And that she was thinking of taking her own avocado sandwiches in for lunch in future. How awful for her.
Okay.
The supply teacher and I considered it to be a successful day if we had the same amount of children at the end of the day as we'd started it. Jenny continued to moan about how Tarquin couldn't tie his shoelaces, even though she'd shown him at least 3 times. Anyway, in week 6 of this routine, I was at the other end of another day of school when there was a knock on the classroom door and the head popped his head round. He beckoned me with a finger and, confused, I left the room after telling the supply teacher I'd only be a couple of minutes and to stay strong. I walked into the head's office to see a police officer standing there. The head introduced me and the police officer started to explain that there'd been an incident of which I needed to be made aware. It turned out that the father of one of my pupils, Reg, had just committed an armed robbery.
Right.
And had been overheard shouting that he was going to pick up his kid and woe betide anyone who got in his way.
Right.
The police officer continued by saying that the armed response unit was on its way to protect Reg, but would be at least another 45 minutes, which took us to the end of the school day. Could I stay with Reggie until they arrived and make sure that no harm came to him and that he didn't leave the school? Of course, I jumped at the chance to protect a small child that had been making my life hell for the last 6 weeks, put myself in the way of a bullet if the father turned up before the armed police. Anyway, the next 45 minutes passed without incident. Reg was collected by a lovely female police officer and was taken away. Needless to say, I was still quite shaken when I got home. My housemates noticed that I appeared to be quieter than normal and asked what was wrong, so I told them the story. Jenny's response: "Oh, that's nothing. I've got my evaluation tomorrow. At least you haven't got that." Well, she said, I'll never be able to sleep tonight. So I left the room and went to bed. 5:30 a.m. the next morning rolls around, and as I was leaving, I noticed that Jenny had left her bag with all her beautifully prepared, handcrafted teaching aids in the hallway next to the radiator. Now, Father Simon, I should point out that we had a radiator in the hallway. It leaked terribly when it was turned on. So basically, we had the choice of freezing to death or drowning in the hallway, and we collectively opted for the former, as if we left the radiator on overnight, the bucket overflowed and made a mess. And a wicked eye idea occurred. What would happen if I moved the bag slightly and turned the radiator on? So I tried it, and yes, the radiator indeed started to drip inside her bag, all over the flashcards and handouts that she had beautifully prepared for the evaluation. I skipped out of the house, safe in the knowledge that it would be at least another 90 minutes before anyone else stirred. My day passed without incident, no guns, no nothing, and I arrived home.
Oh, good.
I could hear the tears and shouting from outside and the protestations from one of the other housemates that she had definitely turned the radiator off. It turns out that the radiator could do quite a lot of damage in 90 minutes, and the whole bag had been completely soaked through. Needless to say, Jenny's evaluation hadn't gone well. For the first time in 6 weeks, Simon, I spent the rest of that evening with a smile on my face. Father Simon, I am not seeking forgiveness from Jenny, as she deserved it. I'm seeking forgiveness from my other housemate, Roz, who took the brunt of the blame for my act. I decided that year that teaching was not for me. I still scan the FBI's Most Wanted page on a regular basis to see if any of the class of 96 had reached the pinnacle of their career ambition, and I tune into Crime Watch every now and again, just to reminisce about my student days. Well, it's tonight's confession, which comes from Lucy, who's decided that teaching is not for her, but a torrid tale involving an armed robbery. Sister Susie from the pub, what do you say?
Well, I have to say, I don't think Jenny was particularly sympathetic or nice to Lucy, so I'll give her that. And if all she had to do was manage to teach Darkwing to tie his shoelaces, and she still whinged about that, I think
did.
Lucy should be lucky that it wasn't Jenny that ended up in that school, because that would have been terrible. However, I do think you should have admitted it, because it's not very fair on Roz, really. I was just about to forgive you until the very end, and I can't, because it was mean on your other housemate. You let her take the blame. You did admit. Sorry.
Not forgiven. Okay, Brother Matthew.
I mean, that story really took a direction that I don't think any of us were anticipating at all. I'm obviously going to forgive, because it's a perfect crime. It's a perfect crime. She got away with it. Roz got the flack. Brilliant. And it was the radiator. Don't put your stuff next to the radiator, Jenny. There's the lesson, Mrs. Teacher. So, yeah, definitely forgiven. And with your avocados and your Tarquins and your whatever else. I mean, it's absolutely tailor-made for me to forgive, I would have thought.
It's the line, it turned out that the father of one of my pupils, Reg, had just committed an armed robbery that made me think, well, I think this is an unusual confession.
Yes, it is.
And